Some men don't lose because they're weak in the obvious way. They lose because they hesitate at the exact moment their own instincts are trying to protect them. They feel the red flag and still stay. They hear the disrespect and still laugh it off. They sense the shift in someone's tone and still explain themselves. And later, when the damage arrives, they call it bad luck, even though the body recognized it early and the mind chose comfort over clarity. There's a kind of scar that doesn't come from life being unfair. It comes from postponing the line that should have been drawn the first time. It comes from softness that keeps presenting itself as virtue. It comes from the old habit of tolerating what you would never advise another man to tolerate. And if a person has lived long enough, he can look back and see the pattern without needing anyone to translate it. Because the same lesson repeats until it's respected, and the same year returns wearing different faces until the posture changes. This is the unnamed way some people live, and it's not loud, it's not a performance, it's not a public declaration of strength, it's simply an internal standard that becomes non-negotiable. Because at a certain point, a man realizes that being good without boundaries is not goodness. It's self-erasure with better marketing, and peace without power is not peace, it's dependence. It's waiting to be treated well as if the world owes it. It's hoping other people will become honorable so you don't have to become firm. Most people are trained to treat their own discomfort like an emergency, to soothe it quickly, to smooth things over, to keep the surface calm even when the foundation is rotting. And that's why they forgive too fast, explain too much, trust too easily, because they're not protecting their life. They're protecting their image of themselves as someone who is easy to deal with. And the world rewards that at first with access and smiles and comfort, and then it punishes it later with disrespect, wasted time, and quiet humiliation that no one posts about. The separation doesn't happen because one man is better than another. It happens because one man finally learns what his patterns cost him, because he stops romanticizing the struggle, stops calling repeated self-betrayal growth, stops confusing endurance with loyalty, and starts recognizing something colder and more freeing. The tolerance is not always patience. Sometimes it's fear of being alone, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing what is familiar even when the familiar is quietly poisoning him. And this is where Stoicism enters, not as quotes, not as aesthetics, not as a personality, but as a discipline of perception. Because Marcus Aurelius wasn't building a brand when he wrote about governing the mind. He was trying to stay uncorrupted by the world's noise, trying to keep a clean interior while living in a world that constantly demanded reaction. And the core of it was always the same, that the only true authority is authority over self. And the man who cannot govern his own responses will always feel as if he is being governed by everyone else. So when a man says quietly that the enemy isn't out there, what he often means is that the greatest damage didn't come from other people's nature. It came from his own refusal to act when clarity arrived. It came from the part of him that noticed everything and still negotiated. The part that kept saying, maybe next time. The part that kept making peace with environments designed to drain him. The part that kept buying comfort with self-respect. Because that trade feels painless in the moment, and then it shows up later as regret. There are men who recognize after enough cycles that the real shift is not motivation, it's not inspiration, it's not another speech, it's a quiet ending, an internal closing of a door where the old version that needed to be liked, needed to be understood, needed to explain, needed to keep access even when access was costing him, simply stops being fed, not through hatred, not through violence, but through standards, because standards starve certain patterns naturally, and what isn't fed loses its grip. That's why the image of a funeral lands for some people, not as theater, but as recognition, because it describes the moment a man stops keeping old habits alive just because they're familiar, stops carrying a personality that was built for survival in weaker seasons, and accepts that the version of him who tolerated everything was never noble. He was just unfinished, and unfinished men get used, not always by villains, often by ordinary people who simply follow incentives. Because the world isn't always cruel, it's often just efficient, and it responds to what you allow. The hunter mentality isn't about aggression, It's about selectivity. It's about choosing where energy goes and where it does not go. It's about not fighting for scraps when you could be building something real. It's about not arguing with people who aren't listening. It's about not chasing closure from people who benefit from your confusion. It's about drawing the line once and letting reality rearrange itself around that line, because a line that moves is not a boundary, it's decoration. And then there's silence, the kind that changes the temperature in a room without needing to announce itself. Because a lot of men talk too much when they're still negotiable. They explain their plans, confess their doubts, justify their choices, hoping honesty will purchase safety. But honesty without discernment becomes leakage, and leakage becomes a map. And once people can map your emotions, they can predict you. And once they can predict you, they can steer you with guilt, with urgency, with approval, with disapproval, with the same old levers that keep most people emotionally obedient while believing they are free. A disciplined man becomes quieter over time, not because he's trying to seem mysterious, but because he realizes that not everything deserves a response, not everyone deserves access, and not every misunderstanding deserves correction, because correction is a form of investment. And some people are not an investment, they're a cost. And the moment a man stops paying that cost, his life gets calmer without him needing to announce a transformation. Detachment, in the Stoic sense, isn't emotional death. It's emotional governance. It's caring without bleeding, giving warmth without dependency, being capable of love without being controlled by love. Because love that makes a man predictable can become a leash, and a leashed man can be dragged into decisions that aren't his, moods that aren't his, conflicts that aren't his. And this is how strong men end up living small lives, not because they lacked ability, but because they leaked their authority into people who never had to earn it. So a certain type of man starts moving differently, not with threats, not with speeches, not with constant self-improvement announcements, but with fewer words, slower reactions, longer pauses, cleaner exits, and a more selective yes. Because the most expensive sentence in a man's life is a yes that his body already knows is wrong. And the most powerful sentence in a man's life is a no. He can say without anger. The strange part is how quickly the environment starts adjusting when a man becomes consistent. Because people will test boundaries that feel soft, and they will respect boundaries that feel final. And final doesn't mean cruel, it means clear. It means no negotiation. It means no repeated speeches. It means no cycle of "I'm done" followed by another chance. Because another chance given to the same pattern isn't kindness, it's permission. This is where strategy becomes identity, because the strong don't fight every battle. They design their life so fewer battles are required. They remove obvious traps. They stop living inside arguments. They stop offering endless explanations. They stop being instantly available. They stop letting other people's emotional urgency set their rhythm. And over time, the mind becomes harder to hook. Not because the world got kinder, but because the gate is finally guarded. And once a man reaches that point, he notices something that other people can't see yet. He notices how many lives are run on autopilot, how many opinions are borrowed, how many reactions are scripted, how many people are being lived by their triggers. And this realization doesn't make him arrogant. It makes him careful, because he understands that the only real power is self-command. And self-command is built in the small moments. The moment you don't explain yourself, the moment you don't chase validation, the moment you don't answer provocation, the moment you don't stay where you're not respected, the moment you don't betray your own standard just to avoid discomfort. Not everyone will understand this shift, and that's fine, because it isn't built for applause, it's built for outcomes, and there are people who will call it cold, simply because they benefited from you being warm and unguarded. And there are people who will call it arrogance, simply because they were used to you being easy to move. And there are people who will call it changed, simply because they can't access you the way they used to. But some men will recognize it instantly, because they've always felt the cost of being too available, too forgiving, too explainable, too patient with mediocrity. And when they hear this, it doesn't feel like motivation. It feels like a mirror, and mirrors don't beg, they just show. If this hits, comment, Hunter. Hit like if it feels like you. And if you want more of this calm, stoic, hunter-minded framing, Discipline without performance, strength without noise. Subscribe, because the noise doesn't stop, and some men quietly stop letting it touch their decisions. Once you see this, you don't unsee it, and after that, it becomes difficult to live the old way without feeling the cost. Because some paths close quietly behind you, and when they close, the only thing left is forward.